Chapter 1885 Team Battle. As agreed by both parties, each side sent out 3 members to fight. Leong Yu's opponent is the Judgment Knight Lancelot. Huahua's opponent is the Holy Knight Percival. Fatty Su's opponent is Sun Knight Gawain. The 3 battlefields are located outside the main battlefield between Zhongyi and King Arthur, and are 3 secondary battlefields above the endless ice ocean. When he saw Leong Yu, a hint of grief and anger flashed in Lancelot's eyes. He still remembered the first time he met Leong Yu and others. At that time, even Zhong Yi had a hard time fighting him. Leong Yu at that time was not worthy of being looked at by him anymore. However, in less than 2 years, such a guy was able to stand against him. Is this God's punishment for me? Lancelot looked up at the sky, scenes of life flashing before his eyes. I was born into a family of earls, and I have been a 1-in-a-million genius since I was born. After the end of the world, he quickly awakened his special powers and was hailed as a rare genius in the world. There is no bottleneck in breaking through to the Ypsilon realm. But later, since I met the monster Pandragon, my life has become completely different. In the end, I have to watch the fight between 2 people who have humiliated me, while I have to stay here and play with a minion. He lowered his eyes, murderous intent emanating from them. Well, I'll get rid of you here and quickly. Since I can't deal with Hun Dun, I can also vent my anger by teaching his men a lesson. Anyway, his sword was unsheathed with the sound of metallic friction. Just leave you a breath, right? Leong Yu felt Lancelot's murderous intent. She didn't say a word, but took out a Han 8-sided sword from the weapon box behind her. If the other party uses a sword, then she also uses a sword. The battlefield between the 2 was an island reef, which was only more than 100 meters long and extremely small in scope. But for the 2 sword-wielding strangers, it was perfect. In close combat, a slight difference can determine victory or defeat. Leong Yu held Long Ming in his left hand and held his right hand empty, standing quietly in place. The 8-sided sword is not a knife. It takes an unconventional approach and is mainly used for stabbing and teasing rather than for violent collisions. The usage is completely different from the opponent's knight's 2-handed sword. When masters fight, the one who strikes first is more likely to reveal a flaw, so Leong Yu steadied his breathing. In just a moment, her whole world became completely quiet. Harmony between man and nature. The state of no self. Forget yourself. Forget your enemies. And when there is no fear in your heart, your hands will not tremble, your eyes will not be confused, and your ears will not buzz. In this state, the human body's potential can be fully tapped. Zhong Yi once said that Leong Yu's ability index does not seem high, but she has the ability to surpass a higher ability index and kill others in seconds. Because her body has already been developed to the extreme. Lancelot doesn't care about that. The knight's charge comes from his fearless and powerful fighting spirit. He raised the great sword high in his right hand, and a protective shield with a cross pattern appeared in his left hand, but the cross mark was cut diagonally by something. I am a Hell Knight who has fallen into the underworld. Let my blood dye the flag of rebellion against heaven red. Fallen ashes of heaven. Black flames shot up into the sky, and the 666 logo on his face twisted strangely, like a living thing. The black netherworld fire completely enveloped him, the sky turned dim, and the black flames wrapped around his body like armor. With sword and shield in hand, he stared at Leong Yu in front of him, and suddenly rushed over. In just a moment, he turned into a burning black line in the void and flew in front of Leong Yu. Then he swung the huge sword in his right hand and chopped it down head-on. Clang! Leong Yu moved. No one saw clearly how she moved, nor did they see how the sword came out of the scabbard. But when her wrist shook and the sword was swung out, the sound was crisp and pleasant like a dragon's roar. A huge force was transmitted to Lancelot's arm, causing his body to suddenly retreat 100 steps, his body shaking continuously. Leong Yu forced him back with one sword. The sword pointed diagonally at the ground, and the look in Leong Yu's eyes as he looked at him was empty. However, this is not the end of the fight, but just the beginning. Leong Yu came like a gentle breeze, and her figure was as soft and swift as catkins in the wind. The eight-sided sword seemed to float over and pierce Lancelot's body. It was so fast that it was almost impossible to dodge, but it seemed to have no killing power at all. This effortless swordsmanship made Lancelot's face change, and he hurriedly raised his sword to defend himself. After the eight-sided sword touched his heavy sword, it was like a long snake clinging to a willow tree. It did not forcefully collide with him, but began to crawl along his sword towards his shoulder. A cold and sticky feeling gave Lancelot goosebumps on his skin. In an era when hot weapons are prevalent, no one knows what the concept of martial arts master means. Choosing to fight Leong Yu in close combat was Lancelot's biggest mistake. The tip of the sword pierced his shoulder like a bamboo leaf green snake. With one strike, his right arm would be completely disabled. Lancelot's pupils shrank suddenly, and all of a sudden, the power of the fallen sky cinders exploded with all his strength. The terrifying black flames gushing out from his body made Leong Yu feel a sense of crisis. But she was not panicked at all, but quickly dodged to a distance. Leong Yu's ability index is only 23,000 points, while Lancelot's is 25,000 points. It is definitely unwise to fight him head-on with his supernatural power. But her superb martial arts can make up for this huge gap. After his figure stopped in the distance, Leong Yu did not pause at all, and immediately started running quickly around Lancelot. The footwork of Bagua Yushin Palm. The most despicable part of this footwork is that it circles around the enemy, making him overwhelmed, dizziness and nervousness, leading to loopholes. Simply put, it is a very effective way for masters to tease outsiders. Leong Yu ran quickly, while the sword in his hand was raised and slashed diagonally. Black sword energy gushed out, like a translucent sky curtain, crashing towards Lancelot. Lancelot had no idea of Leong Yu's strength because he didn't take Leong Yu seriously. But Leong Yu knew his abilities. After each battle, Zhang Yi and his colleagues would share information with each other. This comes from Zhang Yi's belief: for extraordinary people, intelligence is the most precious thing. Whoever controls the intelligence on the battlefield has the initiative. Leong Yu's sword attack did not stop at all, and this attack was not difficult for Lancelot to deal with. He raised the protective shield in his left hand. The protective shield was only the size of his arm, but it was burning with flames, and a huge shield wall with supernatural powers emerged. All of these sword attacks were absorbed. Leong Yu's attack continued without any pause. Her circle was getting smaller and smaller, so she was moving faster and faster. In between attacks, she pulled out a weapon that was flashing with a cold light from her waist pocket. Aim at Lancelot, and throw it out suddenly while attacking with sword energy. Lancelot blocked Leong Yu's sword. At this time, he had slowly adapted to Leong Yu's attack rhythm and was planning to find an opportunity to counterattack. Suddenly, a dazzling silver light flashed before his eyes. Without any hesitation, he swung his sword and slashed out. However, he didn't expect that the silver light would bypass his sword like a spirit snake halfway through its journey, turn in the air at an extremely tricky angle, and pierce his temple. It happened in a flash, due to a momentary misjudgment. By the time Lancelot reacted, the cold light was less than half a meter away from his body. He could feel the threat of death. The sword and shield had already been used, so he could not retract his weapons to fight the enemy again. He could only twist his body as much as he could to avoid the attack. Swish! The weapon scratched past his tactical helmet, making a harsh sound. Lancelot could feel a huge cut on his helmet. The silver light disappeared with a whoosh sound. Only at this moment did he vaguely see what it was. Throwing knife. A white throwing knife. It is hard to imagine that there are still people using this kind of weapon in the 21st century, but the flying knife fired from the hands of a black chariot-level enhanced mutant is faster than any bullet fired from a gun in the world. Although the attack failed, Leong Yu had already gotten everything he wanted. Lancelot's body was unstable, and he had to take time to adjust even if it was just an awkward movement. Otherwise, he would not be able to burst out his strongest power to fight. This is what Zhang Yi had said before, the crucial moment in which martial arts masters fight for their chance to win. Harmony between man and nature. Leong Yu raised the sword at his hand, and at this moment, the world in front of Lancelot suddenly changed. He could not see the world, he just felt that it suddenly became blurry, and only Leong Yu in front of him was real. But his eyes could clearly see her, but his consciousness, his body, and his instinct against the enemy all told him clearly that there was no one in front of him. This feeling of his brain being separated from his body made it impossible for him to lift the sword in his hand. What are you doing with the sword? Go and cut a piece of nothingness? Maybe it was just an illusion. Leong Yu's sword came in front of Lancelot. When the sword pierced his body, the intense pain made Lancelot regain consciousness and made him clearly realize that the enemy in front of him was real. Bang! The combat suit on his body that was burning with the scorching fire of hell suddenly collapsed, and the long sword pierced into his chest, taking his life in the next moment. Leong Yu was very confident in her swordsmanship. She could keep the tip of her sword half an inch away from Lancelot's heart, ensuring that his life would not be taken. But at this moment, Lancelot had already reacted. Ah! An angry roar came from his mouth, and a horrifying black flame burst out from his naked chest, rushing towards Leong Yu's face. Leong Yu still did not confront head-on, and quickly dodged the attack. Lancelot used his supernatural power bursts twice. This method is not uncommon for supernatural beings. It is to gather the supernatural energy and then shoot it out from all the acupoints in the body. This is a means of fighting the enemy in critical moments, but it is also harmful to oneself and consumes huge resources. A master like Leong Yu, who is proficient in his skills, would never use such crude techniques. Lancelot took a deep breath. He was very uncomfortable with the rhythm of the battlefield falling into the hands of the opponent. He had to admit now that he had underestimated his opponent. Such superb fighting skills are definitely not something that ordinary people can possess. Finally, he began to face the woman in front of him seriously. With very powerful melee skills, Jian Shou can be said to be a master of weapons. But she is only a reinforcement system, and her weaknesses are the release of superpowers and long-range attacks. So, he tightened the muscles in his legs, and then the next moment, he quickly retreated to the rear. Just keep your distance and continue to consume the enemy's energy from a distance. Leong Yu saw Lancelot retreating and knew what he was planning. However, she was not in a hurry at all. Instead, she put her feet on the sea and chased after the other party like a snake. Two black shadows kept flashing across the sea. Boom! 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 Black flames shot up into the sky and hit the direction where Leong Yu was. Leong Yu had to stop and then swing his sword to break the attack of the hellish black flames. After Lancelot ran far enough, he began his attack plan. Black flames gushed out from the edge of his sword, harassing Leong Yu from a very long distance. He had already realized that the opponent was not a weak one that he could defeat quickly. The best way is to use the advantage of your stronger supernatural attributes and continuously launch ultra-long-range attacks to wear down the opponent's physical strength. When Leong Yu's physical strength and special energy can no longer hold up, or when there is a slight mistake during the battle, he can take the opportunity to end the battle with one blow. Knights of the Round Table. Holy Knight, Percival lowered his head at this time, with a confused expression on his face. It was clearly agreed that his opponent was a strong man from the Chaos team, a super ferocious beast that killed many people in the West on the battlefield. But why? At this moment, the thing sitting quietly in front of him with its tail coiled up was actually a little cat with black patterns on its back and a patch of snow-white fur on its chest. Huh! He tilted his head, unable to understand what was happening before his eyes. Meow. Huahua opened her mouth wide and called out. A faint blush suddenly appeared on Percival's face, and his eyes narrowed happily. How cute! Little kitty, are you lost? Huahua opened her squinting eyes a little. The next moment, a terrifying force burst out from its body. The terror of that supernatural power forced Percival to take several steps back. Huahua transformed from a cute little cat into a majestic feline with 2 pairs of wings on its back in an instant. There is a natural king character on its head, and its body is covered with a layer of armor that looks very thin but is actually extremely tough. This is a skin coat specially tailored for it by Liu Karen. It is usually hidden among the hair and will not burst even after its body grows bigger. Since Huahua already possesses extremely strong combat power, this layer of armor only strengthens its defense. Whether it is close combat or ultra-long-range attack, Huahua is proficient in it. It is simply a perfect biological fighting machine. Roar! After becoming huge, Huahua was like a prehistoric beast, standing on the sea with its west limbs, and roared at Percival. Seeing this, Percival couldn't help but sigh. "You were so cute just now." But he raised his head and looked at the majestic Huahua. "You look even more handsome now." A layer of sacred golden light emerged above his body, and his golden battle armor also burst into an even brighter light at this moment. In an instant, his body became taller, but his legs at the lower half disappeared. Instead, it has the body of a centaur. He became extremely huge, his height comparable to Huahua's. His upper body was that of a human wearing golden armor, and his lower body was that of a gigantic warhorse. Sharp claws popped out from Huahua's paw pads. Without any hesitation, it opened its bloody mouth, and a ball of blood-colored energy gathered into a sphere. Then it suddenly exploded and turned into a red beam of light that shot towards Percival. Percival raised his hands into the air, and two balls of golden energy transformed into two curved swords in his palms. Facing the red supernatural cannon, his expression did not change at all. He just simply chopped it down with a knife. The sword light split the two spaces, and with great power, it collided fiercely with the red energy cannon. The sea was boiling, and a huge hole was blasted out, and millions of tons of sea water rushed into the sky. The sea water quickly flowed back, creating a shocking and magnificent scene. At this moment, Huahua rushed towards Percival like a gust of wind. Cats are natural hunters, and hunting creatures of the same size is no problem for them. Although it is huge, its body is extremely flexible. The huge black shadow flickers on the sea like a phantom. The cat has already arrived.
Kill.
The huge front paws revealed their cold and sharp claws and tore at Percival fiercely. Percival was shocked by Huahua's speed and quickly raised his scimitars in both hands to block Huahua's attack. Clang! Clang! The attack from the double claws was blocked by the scimitar. But what awaited Percival was Huahua's crazy grabbing. Cats have very strong dynamic vision, and their claws can be dazzlingly fast. It stood up like a human being, enough for it to look down at the centaur in front of it. The two huge claws left afterimages because they pounced so quickly. Swish! 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 Huahua's claws waved forward at a frequency of thousands of times per second, like 10 sharp steel knives slashing. There was no pattern. It was simply the feline's hunting instinct, attacking as if it were playing with a mouse. This fierce attack was beyond Percival's expectations. He was well-versed in dealing with humans, but this was the first time he encountered a black chariot-class war beast. You know, Huahua is Zhang Yi's most trusted confidant. If we were to ask who eats the best in the entire shelter, Huahua would definitely be second only to Zhang Yi, because Zhang Yi poured a lot of resources into it. Let's put it this way. The centipede farm managed by Frog produces a batch of centipedes every month that are as fat as pigs and have a high ability index. They are Huahua's little snacks. She eats them like spicy strips and eats a few whenever she has time. The 9,000-plus ground centipede is of little help to the improvement of the Epsilon-level mutant, but it can't withstand the large amount of food it eats. Now Huahua's ability index has reached a terrifying 22,000 points. An ability index comparable to that of Percival. At this time, the horror of cats is fully revealed. Percival used short scimitars on horseback in both hands. He was a good hand in close combat, but how could a human's reaction speed compare to that of a cat? Soon, he was injured in the violent and almost never-ending collision. Rep. When the scimitar in his left hand was blocking the attack from Huahua's sharp claws, the back of his hand was scratched. Just by this scratch, a large piece of flesh and blood was removed. The scars left behind are so deep that you can see the bones. Percival's eyes narrowed, knowing that it was not worthwhile to fight a cat like this. Meow. After seeing the blood, Huahua's eyes turned red. It is inevitable that wild beasts will get excited when seeing blood. It let out a horrible roar, and its bloody fangs like a cobra bit down on Percival's head. Huahua's bite force is no joke. If he gets bitten this time, even if his head isn't bitten off, it will be difficult for him to break free. At this moment, Percival acted quickly. His centaur body suddenly turned around, raised his hind hooves high, and then kicked Huahua's chest hard. A horse's strongest means of attack is kicking from behind and trampling. The force of the kick is enough to kill a lion or a tiger. Huahua hadn't expected his move and was unable to dodge in time. She could only use her sharp cat claws to block. Bang! But its chest was still kicked hard by the horse's hoof. However, Huahua's sharp claws also grabbed the centaur's legs, like 10 sharp daggers, which sank deeply into its legs after being bent with force. Huahua was kicked hard and flew away. The huge cat flew into the sea hundreds of meters away and fell into the sea with a plop sound. But Percival was not in a better condition, because Huahua tore off 2 large pieces of flesh from his centaur's buttocks, and the blood dyed the sea red. Hiss! Damn it! Percival grimaced in pain. But he didn't even have time to cry out, because in the distant sea, a wave rushed towards him like a sharp sword. Beneath the sea, there is a huge shadow like a hill. Cats are also good swimmers. Sneaking through the water is faster than being on the surface. It was true that Percival's kick hit Huahua's chest, but Huahua's physical fitness was already very high, and with the protection of armor, he only felt a little stuffy in his chest. Cats have 9 lives, no joke. This level of attack did not cause any pain to Jianshou. Percival had already witnessed the madness of cats in close combat, so he dared not wait for Huahua to get closer.